Financial crises always feel unprecedented to those living through them, yet from a distance, they reveal themselves as recurring movements in the same dangerous symphony. In 1929, in the stifling corridors of Wall Street, a few noticed what the crowd refused to see. The music was about to stop. In 2008, when the glow of real estate masked rotting debt, another small group quietly raised its shields while the rest of the world celebrated. And now, in 2025, the same pattern resurfaces, not as coincidence, but as consequence. History, like a clock, strikes 4 phases before every monumental fall. First, the visionaries step back while collective enthusiasm hits its peak. Then they build their defenses, buying instruments that flourish in chaos. Next, they aim their bets at fragile targets, anticipating the first domino. And finally, when fear drowns even the most seasoned, those same visionaries return to buy what everyone else has thrown away. The signals are sprouting again, record amounts of money sitting idle in cash, founders unloading shares of the empires they helped build, funds preparing positions that only pay off if the world collapses. This isn't mystical prophecy. It's documented behavior, almost mechanical. In a world addicted to technological optimism, where AI models redraw industrial boundaries and governments race to control strategic supply chains, few notice that the cost of such exuberant growth is a market inflated beyond sustainability. But those who truly understand the engines of the global economy are once again walking in the opposite direction of the crowd. The global stage is set. The next turn has already begun, even if silently. And while most people look to the sky hoping for a bright dawn, something darker creeps in from the edges, unseen until it's too late. But what exactly triggers the first step of this financial ritual? The first phase always unfolds with an unsettling calm. No sirens, no panic, only the almost imperceptible movements of those who command billions. In silent halls and offices overlooking megacities, legendary figures begin doing something that contradicts the collective euphoria. They leave. The everyday investor reads a market rally as proof of a brilliant future, but the disciplined minds who've survived decades know that when everything feels too easy, the real risk is hiding just beneath the surface. In 1929, magnates sensed that the mountain climbed with enthusiasm was about to turn into an abyss. Decades later, the specialists who dissected toxic mortgages reached the same conclusion long before the collapse. In 2025, history sketches its familiar contours once again. Leaders of the companies that shaped the digital world, giants controlling information flows, global logistics, and planet-wide social networks, begin unloading massive stakes. Not small sales for diversification, strategic withdrawals, gradual and measured like surgical procedures. On the other side, institutional investors are holding more cash than at any other point in modern history. While news anchors celebrate record highs, these veterans see the opposite: ballooning corporate debt, profits inflated on paper, weakened regional banks, and a geopolitical landscape that makes every forecast more fragile. A storm not yet formed, but whose winds are already brushing against those who know how to feel them. The crowd keeps buying. They, quietly, begin to exit. Not because they know the exact date of the fall, but because they recognize the same patterns from 1929, 2008, and so many others. They close positions, cut exposure, clean their portfolios. And somewhere in the shadows of this movement, a question emerges. What do they know that the rest of the world still doesn't? When the second stage begins, nothing in the external environment seems to signal danger. The economy is still growing, the media is still celebrating victories, and bubbles are still being praised as new paradigms. That is precisely why the financial elite makes its most calculated move. They buy what only becomes valuable when the ground collapses. In the 1920s, this protection was rudimentary. Short positions, borrowed shares, risky trades held until panic spilled into the streets. In the early 21st century, this defense evolved into sophisticated financial engineering. Credit default insurance, options that explode in value with volatility, structured bets against entire sectors. In 2025, the movement appears once again. High-caliber funds are acquiring contracts that sound strange to the average investor. Corporate credit insurance, long-dated volatility options, protection so specific they seem hidden in plain sight, but they aren't. They're there for anyone who knows how to trace the trail. These instruments aren't cheap once fear spreads. That's why they're bought now, when almost no one believes they'll ever be needed. It's like stocking a storm shelter under a perfectly blue sky. And the movement is so broad, it's already seeping into reports, though few notice. The logic is simple and unforgiving. If nothing happens, they lose a few fees. But if everything happens, their gains become immeasurable. And the warning signs are already piling up. Government deficits, corporate debt starting to tremble, geopolitical conflicts threatening energy routes and supply chains, The world is operating with margins thinner than ever, and while the majority celebrates numbers and headlines, the silent bets keep stacking up. But once the insurance is in place, what exactly are they preparing to profit from? The third phase is no longer subtle. It's strategic. It's surgical. It's the moment when the smartest money selects its targets with military precision. In past crises, those bold enough to look closely identified which structures were built on sand. In 2008, the focus wasn't housing in general. It was specific mortgages, specific regions, specific banks. It wasn't pessimism, it was mathematics. In 2225, the targets are once again standing out like weakened buildings before an earthquake. The first is the vast commercial real estate sector. Towers that once symbolized power now hold entire floors of emptiness. The nature of work has changed irreversibly. The income from these buildings no longer covers even the interest on debts taken out when money was cheap. The math doesn't add up. And when the math doesn't add up, collapse is only a matter of time. The second target is regional banks. Smaller institutions, yet the backbone of local credit. They carry a significant share of the commercial real estate loans now on the brink. If these properties fail to refinance, the banks absorb the losses. And if the losses grow too large, the door's shut. Top investors have already mapped out, bank by bank, who is most exposed. They know which cities face record vacancies. They know which balance sheets are disguising risk, and they're betting against them with conviction. Most citizens still see solid institutions, but behind the modern glass facades are numbers that scream. And when the first buildings default, the wave will hit those who least expect it. And when everything falls apart, who will be ready to gather the pieces? The fourth phase isn't for the faint of heart. It arrives when fear freezes even the veterans. It's the moment when indexes collapse, headlines announce back-to-back failures, and governments call emergency meetings night after night. That's how it was in the 1930s. That's how it was in 2008. And that's how it will be when the current cycle reaches its peak. The fall never comes in a straight line. It comes in waves. Banks freeze lending, companies lay off workers, funds implode. The global economy, laced together by fragile supply chains, suffers sudden shocks. A ship stuck in a strategic strait, an unexpected sanction, a diplomatic rupture. Any spark amplifies the chaos. Markets plunge. Portfolios that once seemed untouchable are eaten away. Everyday investors cling to their assets, praying for a rebound, unable to accept the loss. Despair takes over forums, newsrooms, and bar conversations. But there is a group that doesn't flinch, because they've already lived through the three prior phases, because they've been waiting for this exact moment. They have cash, they have discipline, they have lists of companies they've always wanted to buy but never could until now. And when fear-driven selling turns into avalanches, they step onto the stage. It's the moment when preferred shares are sold at liquidation prices, solid companies are traded as if they're collapsing, valuable properties change hands for a fraction of their true worth. This is when empires are built, while the rest of the world falls apart. But how do these moves shape not only individual fortunes, but the global balance of power itself? Deep crises have a curious effect. They reveal who truly runs the world. Not governments, not celebrities, not digital influencers. It's institutions holding liquidity when everyone else is dry. They are the silent architects shaping entire economies. When panic peaks, giant corporations begin selling entire divisions just to survive. Emerging nations rush through privatizations to stabilize their currencies. Sovereign wealth funds seek protection by buying strategic stakes abroad. Meanwhile, geopolitical powers try to shield their vital sectors: energy, technology, semiconductors, tightening global tensions even further. It's in this vacuum that the strategists of capital step in. Global funds with decades of track record, century-old family conglomerates, state investors with trillions in reserves. They don't see a crisis. They see a reorganization of the board. They seize the moment to acquire infrastructure companies, logistics networks, data providers, rare metals, agricultural land. Not just because they're cheap, but because they are foundational pieces in the international power game. Controlling these assets determines who will dominate the next 20 years. The public sees opportunistic acquisitions. They see geostrategic repositioning. While the real economy bleeds, a new hierarchy emerges. Corporate alliances are forged, new magnates rise. Rival nations compete for critical assets as if they were territories on a war map. By the time the storm finally starts to settle, the world is no longer the same. The winners aren't those who took the biggest risks, but those who understood the choreography of the four phases. And for the ordinary individual, is there any way not to be swallowed by this process? Most people don't have billions to move markets, nor access to the back rooms where strategic decisions are made. But they do have something that every recurring crisis has always provided: the chance to recognize the pattern before it's too late. You don't need to predict the exact date of a global downturn. You only need to recognize when elite movements stop being coincidences, to see when euphoria becomes disproportionate to fundamentals, to notice when entire sectors reveal cracks that everyone else chooses to ignore. The four phases aren't a manual for getting rich quickly. They are a map of the forces that shape economic cycles. For the everyday person, applying them means something different: preserving capital, cultivating prudence, building reserves, and waiting for the opportunities that always emerge in the middle of chaos. Crises are ruthless, but they are also democratic in their destruction. The difference between those who rise again and those who sink lies in preparation, not luck. In the coming months, perhaps years, the signals will intensify. Companies once praised as revolutionary will face brutal declines. Banks considered stable will struggle to breathe. Governments will try to project calm while their monetary printers shift into high gear. And when fear reaches its peak, the stage will be set for the final phase, the phase in which quiet decisions determine who will prosper in the rebuilding. Because history doesn't ask whether you're ready, it simply arrives. And now, the cycle has begun again,